The rejected Omega whispered, "You're being betrayed." The Alpha King canceled the ceremony and lock. The kingdom of Urendor lay under a twilight sky, where the mountains met the clouds like the edges of a half-forgotten dream. The castle of the Alpha King, Alaric, rose from the cliffs like a jagged crown, dark stone walls glowing faintly under the last rays of the sun. Here, magic lingered like a perfume, subtle yet dangerous, twisting in the air around the turrets and towers. Within these walls, power was absolute and loyalty was fragile. Lyric moved quietly through the corridors, their steps careful, measured, like a shadow avoiding notice. The Omega had always been underestimated in Urendor, dismissed as delicate, gentle, someone whose voice carried little weight. But Lyric had learned long ago that truth could hide in whispers, and sometimes whispers could save a kingdom. They paused at the balcony overlooking the northern gardens. The wind carried scents of night-blooming flowers and distant pine. Lyric's eyes scanned the courtyard, where servants hurried, guards practiced their drills, and nobles in silk and velvet whispered among themselves. Something felt wrong. Subtle, almost invisible signs of tension clung to the castle like fog. A hand lingered too long on a dagger, a shadow paused too long in a corridor, a smile seemed too smooth, too polished, too empty. Lyric's fingers brushed the silver pendant at their throat, a gift from someone who had believed in their insight long gone. They whispered under their breath, words almost too small to hear. Something is coming, something they cannot see. The day of the royal ceremony was meant to celebrate Alaric's power, to show the kingdom that the Alpha King's rule was unshakable. Nobles from distant lands had arrived, bringing gifts, flattery, and ambition wrapped in silk and gold. The air in the castle shimmered with anticipation, yet Lyric could sense the undercurrent of danger. As the Omega prepared the hall for the ceremony, they felt the tension in every corner. Candles flickered in their sconces, shadows dancing unnaturally against the stone walls. Every smile felt forced, every bow calculated. Lyric noticed how a particular advisor, a man trusted by the king for years, lingered near the ceremonial throne, watching with quiet calculation. Lyric's heart beat faster, a whisper of fear mingled with urgency. They had seen this before, schemes that were quiet, subtle, and deadly. One wrong move, and the entire kingdom could fall. They sought the Alpha King, navigating the grand hall where banners of the royal house fluttered above polished floors. Alaric stood near the throne, a figure carved of authority and power, dressed in a cloak of midnight blue embroidered with silver. His eyes, sharp and gray, scanned the room as if he could see every secret, every lie. "Your Majesty," Lyric said softly, bowing. "May I speak with you?" Alaric's gaze flicked toward them, unreadable. "Speak." His voice was calm, like a lake hiding a storm beneath its surface. Lyric hesitated, feeling the weight of the words they were about to share. "You are being betrayed," they whispered. Alaric's eyes narrowed, and for a moment the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Then the king's expression hardened, a mask of steel and control. "Explain," he demanded. Lyric told him what they had seen. The lingering hands, the hurried messages, the subtle signs of conspiracy. The words spilled out, careful, precise, each one carrying the gravity of truth. Alaric listened without interruption, his jaw tight, eyes flicking from the Omega to the nobles assembled in the hall. When Lyric finished, the silence that followed was almost unbearable. Then, as if the weight of centuries rested on a single decision, Alaric spoke. "The ceremony is cancelled. Lock the gates." The words struck the hall like thunder. Whispers erupted, faces fell, and a tension unlike any before filled the air. Servants froze, nobles glanced nervously at one another, and Lyric felt their pulse pound in their ears. "Lock the gates," Alaric repeated, his voice louder, echoing off the stone walls. "No one leaves, no one enters, until I see the truth with my own eyes." The Omega's heart skipped a beat. They had warned him, but the risk now was greater than they could have imagined. Secrets that had slumbered for decades now stirred, claws sharp and waiting. That night, Lyric was summoned to the private chambers of the Alpha King. Candles burned low, casting tall shadows that twisted across the walls. Alaric's silhouette was imposing, his presence filling the room. He did not sit, he leaned against the edge of his throne, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. "You brought me a warning," he said, voice low, almost intimate, "but why now? Why tonight?" Lyric swallowed, knowing that any hesitation could betray them. "I have watched, I have listened. Something dark stirs among your council. I could not wait for the ceremony." Alaric stepped closer, and Lyric felt the pull of his authority, the kind that could bend hearts and minds alike. "Do you expect me to trust you? An Omega dismissed for your quiet ways. The world sees you as gentle, as fragile. How do I know this is not a trick?" Lyric met his gaze, unwavering. "Because I would never speak unless it was truth. You are the only one who can stop it." Alaric studied them, a storm of thought behind his gray eyes. Then with a sudden motion he reached out and lifted Lyric's chin, forcing them to look directly at him. "You are brave," he said softly, "and perhaps more dangerous than I first thought." Lyric's breath caught. There was a tension in the air, thick and electric, a mix of fear and fascination. They knew that the Alpha King's attention was both a blessing and a peril. One misstep, one misread glance, and they could fall into ruin. Yet in that moment, Lyric understood something deeper, that their role was no longer just observer. They were part of the game, a key in a world of shadows and whispers. The castle was restless that night. Guards patrolled with sharpened senses, servants moved like shadows, and the halls seemed alive with unseen eyes. Lyric could hear whispers in every corridor, soft echoes of voices they could not place. Magic, dark and old, twined through the air, responding to tension, fear, and ambition. Lyric wandered to the northern balcony again, eyes scanning the horizon. Lightning flickered over the mountains in the distance, brief and stark, illuminating the land in silver and shadow. The Omega's heart tightened. The danger was not distant. It was inside the castle, inside the very walls that were supposed to protect the king. And then Lyric saw it, a shadow moving where no one should be. A figure cloaked in black, slipping through corridors, avoiding guards, carrying something that glinted in the candlelight, a dagger, perhaps, or a token of dark magic. Lyric's breath caught, and without thinking they ran toward the sound. Their steps were silent, a shadow among shadows, following the figure through twisting corridors and hidden stairwells. The palace seemed to bend around them, walls stretching, doors closing almost magically behind the intruder. Finally, the figure stopped in a small antechamber near the throne room. Lyric pressed themselves against the stone, heart hammering. The intruder muttered words under their breath, words of curses and betrayal. They were planning something, something that could ruin the king, perhaps even destroy him. Lyric reached for their pendant, a reminder of courage and insight. They whispered a prayer under their breath and stepped into the antechamber, catching the intruder by surprise. "Stop," Lyric said, voice firm despite the tremor in their chest. The figure spun, eyes wide in shock. For a moment everything was still, suspended like glass. Then, without a word, the intruder fled, vanishing into the shadows of the castle. Lyric stood alone, heart pounding, knowing that what they had seen was only a fragment of the threat. They returned to the balcony just as dawn began to break, painting the mountains in pink and gold. The castle was quiet, but the Omega's mind raced. The danger was real, and the conspiracy ran deeper than they had imagined. And in the distance, Lyric felt it, a pulse of dark magic, subtle and dangerous, wrapping around the castle like a serpent. Something old and powerful had awakened. Lyric whispered into the wind, words carried away before anyone could hear. "The ceremony is only the beginning. The kingdom trembles, and so do we all." Below, the gates remained locked. Inside, the nobles whispered in confusion and fear. And somewhere in the throne room, Alaric waited, gray eyes sharp, heart cautious. He had heard Lyric's warning. He had acted, but neither of them knew how close the storm truly was. In the heart of the castle, shadows shifted, secrets deepened, and the Omega realized that their quiet life of observation had ended. The game of power, betrayal, and survival had begun, and Lyric was now a central player. And as the sun rose over Urindor, one truth remained clear. The kingdom would never be the same again. The castle of Urindor was a maze of stone corridors, twisting staircases, and secret doors. After the cancelled ceremony, a restless tension hung in the air. Guards moved in tighter formations, their hands never far from swords. Nobles whispered behind closed doors, eyes darting like birds sensing a predator. Candles flickered in every hall, shadows bending in strange and unnerving ways. The palace itself seemed alive, responding to fear. Lyric walked through the halls with careful steps, the weight of responsibility pressing on them like the stone walls themselves. Ever since their warning to King Alaric, the Alpha had kept a careful distance, sometimes cold, sometimes watchful, but always present. The Omega's place in the castle was no longer simple. They were too close to power, too important to be ignored, and yet still far from truly trusted. The Alpha King had given a command that no one dared question. The gates would remain locked until the threat within was uncovered. Nobles were confined, servants watched with suspicion, and the air was thick with unease. But it was not fear alone that Lyric felt. It was a strange mixture of fascination, dread, and something like longing whenever Alaric was near. Alaric stood in the grand hall, arms folded, staring at the banners that swayed above the polished floors. His expression was calm, but Lyric had learned to read the subtle signs. The tightened jaw, the way his fingers curled slightly at his sides, the intensity in his gray eyes that betrayed restless thoughts. "You moved quickly to warn me," he said when Lyric approached. "But others may not share your sense of observation. Do you understand what it means to make an enemy among the council?" Lyric nodded, meeting his gaze. "I do, but I cannot remain silent. The danger is real. They are planning something that could destroy you." Alaric studied them, and for a long moment neither spoke. The tension between them was almost tangible, like the crackle before a storm. Finally, he said, "Then you will stay close. I will not allow you to wander alone until this matter is settled." Lyric felt a shiver of both fear and anticipation. Being near the Alpha King could be dangerous, but it also meant their warnings would matter, their voice could finally be heard. The first day under lockdown was a quiet one. Nobles moved through the halls like caged birds, avoiding one another's eyes. Whispers floated from behind tapestries, words of suspicion and ambition twisting through the air. Lyric moved among them carefully, observing faces, noting gestures, and listening for lies hidden in polite smiles. It was during a small council meeting that the first true danger revealed itself. Alaric had gathered his most trusted advisors in the war room, the walls lined with maps and ancient artifacts. Candles cast long shadows that seemed to flicker with movement of their own. "The kingdom cannot remain blind to betrayal," Alaric said, his voice steady. "Someone has plotted against me, someone within these walls." A hush fell. Eyes darted to one another, breaths caught in silence. Lyric could feel the weight of the room pressing down, the subtle currents of fear and ambition mixing like storm clouds. One advisor, a man named Vareth, spoke first, his voice smooth but cold. "Your Majesty, surely you overestimate the loyalty of your own council. Rumors spread easily in times of fear." Alaric's eyes, sharp as blades, turned to him. "And what do you say, Lyric?" The Omega felt every gaze turn toward them. "I say that the danger is real," Lyric replied, voice steady despite the pounding of their heart. "And subtle. Those who appear loyal may hide intentions sharper than any blade. We must watch carefully, trust sparingly." A murmur ran through the council, a ripple of tension that shook the very air. Alaric's jaw tightened. Then we act carefully, he said, and we act quickly. As the day passed, Lyric accompanied the king through the halls, their presence a constant reminder that vigilance was required. They moved silently, observing servants and guards, noting inconsistencies, listening to whispers. Every face could conceal danger, every gesture could hide betrayal. The castle was a cage, and yet Lyric felt strangely alive inside it, each shadow and secret sharpening their senses. Alaric spoke rarely, but his presence was like a constant pressure, a reminder of the power and danger he wielded. Sometimes, Lyric caught glimpses of vulnerability in him, moments when the mask slipped, and they saw a man burdened by the crown, haunted by the betrayals he had suffered before. Those moments left Lyric unsettled and strangely drawn. By nightfall, they discovered the first true evidence of the plot. In one of the servant passages, hidden behind a false panel, Lyric found a small box of letters and notes, carefully concealed. The words inside spoke of secret alliances, dark magic, and the plan to use the royal ceremony as a trap to overthrow the king. Lyric's hands shook slightly as they clutched the documents. The danger was closer than they had imagined. And yet, even as fear rose, determination settled in their chest. They had warned the king once. Now they must ensure he saw the full truth before it was too late. Later, Alaric summoned Lyric to his private chambers again. The storm outside had begun, rain lashing against the windows, lightning illuminating the room in jagged flashes. The king stood near the window, cloak damp, eyes fixed on the darkened gardens. "You have found proof," he said without turning, "and yet I sense hesitation." "Speak freely." Lyric stepped closer, laying the letters on the desk. "These are the details of the plot. The ceremony was only a part of it. They planned more, attacks on allies, manipulation of powerful magic, even the use of curses against the royal bloodline." Alaric's face remained calm, but Lyric could see the storm behind his eyes. "You risk your life by bringing me this," he said. "Do you understand that?" "I do," Lyric replied, their voice steady. "And I accept it. The kingdom must be protected, even if it means danger for me." The king finally turned to look at them fully. His gray eyes held a mixture of calculation and something else. Respect, perhaps, or acknowledgement of courage that few could match. "You are braver than you know," he said softly, "and perhaps wiser than some who claim loyalty." The Omega felt a strange warmth in their chest at his words, but there was no time for comfort. Outside the window, lightning struck the far tower, a sound of warning that seemed almost magical in its intensity. The storm was not merely weather, it felt like a herald of the chaos yet to come. As night deepened, Lyric walked through the quiet halls, observing, listening. The storm outside mirrored the tension within. Every door, every shadow, every whisper seemed alive with the threat of betrayal. They felt eyes on them constantly, though the source was unseen. The castle itself was a trap, and Lyric had to navigate carefully, for one wrong step could doom not only themselves but the king they had sworn to protect. And then Lyric heard it, a faint sound, almost too quiet to recognize. A whisper in the darkness, not carried by the wind but seeming to come from the walls themselves. "He cannot trust them, nor can you." Lyric froze, heart pounding. The whisper was a warning, yes, but it carried something else, a sense of presence, a hidden observer. Someone was moving within the castle, unseen, perhaps one of the conspirators, perhaps something more dangerous. They followed the sound through a hidden corridor, moving silently, alert. Shadows danced along the walls, and the storm outside made each step feel heavier, the thunder echoing like the heartbeat of the castle itself. Finally, Lyric reached a small chamber near the throne room. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, a figure cloaked in black worked over a small desk, muttering words that sounded almost like a chant. Candles flickered, casting long, jagged shadows. Lyric's breath caught. This was it, the proof of betrayal, the living evidence of the danger. And yet the figure had not noticed them. The Omega's heart pounded. One wrong move and everything could be lost. "Stop!" Lyric called, their voice firm despite the fear clawing at their chest. The figure froze, spinning at the sound. Their eyes, wide in shock, met Lyric's. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, without a word, the figure vanished into the shadows, slipping through a hidden passage faster than Lyric could follow. Lyric's hands trembled as they clenched the edges of the doorframe. They had seen the enemy, felt the danger in its immediacy, but they had not caught it. The conspiracy was larger, more dangerous, and more deeply hidden than they had imagined. Returning to the balcony, Lyric looked out over the storm-lashed gardens. Rain streaked their face, wind tangled their hair, but their resolve hardened. The castle was a cage of power, of danger, and of secrets. Yet within it, Lyric felt a strange awakening, strength, courage, and the knowledge that their voice could shape destiny. The Alpha King waited within the walls, unaware of how close the danger had come, or perhaps aware, and testing the Omega's courage. Either way, Lyric knew one thing with certainty: they could not falter. The game of trust, betrayal, and survival had only just begun. The storm over Erendor had not subsided. Lightning cleaved the sky in jagged lines, illuminating the castle walls in brief flashes of silver and shadow. Rain poured over the northern cliffs, pattering against the stone and rushing down the terraces. Inside, the palace was alive with unease. Every corridor echoed with hurried steps, every chamber hummed with whispers. The castle seemed to pulse with tension, as if aware of the danger lurking in its halls. Lyric moved carefully through the quiet passages, senses alert. Every flicker of shadow, every sound of movement made their heart race. They had seen the intruder once, but now the danger felt closer, more deliberate, more alive. Someone, or something, was working within the castle, hidden in the corners where no one dared look. Their thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of approaching footsteps. Lyric turned, heart skipping a beat. King Alaric emerged from the shadows, cloak damp from the storm, his gray eyes sharp and unreadable. Even in the dim light, his presence filled the corridor like a force of nature. "You followed me," Alaric said, voice calm but carrying an edge. Lyric bowed slightly. "I watch where danger hides. I cannot leave it unchecked." Alaric's eyes softened for just a moment, a fleeting expression that no one else might notice. "You risk yourself for me. Do you know what that means?" "I do," Lyric said, meeting his gaze, "and I accept it." There was a silence then, thick and charged, broken only by the sound of rain against the stone windows. The Omega could feel the power radiating from Alaric, the magnetic force of his presence. It was terrifying and thrilling all at once, but there was no time for distraction. The castle itself demanded vigilance. That night, Alaric called an emergency council in the inner hall. The candles flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced across maps and ancient artifacts. Nobles and advisors looked tense, each of them aware of the lockdown and the whispered threats of betrayal. The storm outside only intensified the mood, thunder rumbling like the heartbeat of the kingdom. "Someone has planned against me," Alaric said, voice steady, carrying the weight of authority. "And they will act if we do not expose them first." A murmur ran through the council, fear and suspicion mingling in every glance. Lyric noticed subtle movements, a hand tightening around a dagger, a quick glance shared between two advisors, a servant hesitating in the doorway. Every gesture was a potential threat. Lyric stepped forward, their voice clear. "The threat is closer than we think. They move through the castle as if it belongs to them. Not all who serve appear loyal. Some betrayals wear the face of friendship." Alaric's eyes locked with Lyric's, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He had learned to trust the Omega's insight, even if others in the hall doubted. "Then we act, carefully but without hesitation." The council dispersed, leaving Lyric and Alaric alone in the hall. The storm cast flickering light across their faces. For a moment, the Alpha King seemed almost vulnerable, a man who bore the weight of the crown alone. Lyric felt a strange pull, a mix of fear and admiration, and knew that their role had become more than a warning. They were now a shield, a confidant, a presence the king could not ignore. As midnight approached, Lyric wandered the castle alone, following a subtle trail of movement and whispers. They sensed a pulse of magic in the walls, subtle but dark, wrapping itself around the stone like a living shadow. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. They had learned to move like a shadow themselves, silent, observant, invisible to those who underestimated them. The intruder appeared again, a cloaked figure moving through hidden passages. Lyric's heart raced. This time they would not let it escape. They followed quietly, keeping to the walls, their eyes sharp. The figure stopped in a small chamber beneath the castle, an antechamber lined with relics of old power. Candles burned low, flickering, shadows twisting like living things. The intruder muttered words under their breath, words of manipulation and dark magic, intending to harness forces that should never be touched. Lyric stepped forward, voice firm. "Stop! You cannot hide from the truth." The intruder froze, turning slowly. The candlelight revealed a face masked by a hood, eyes bright with urgency. Before Lyric could act further, the figure vanished through a hidden passage, leaving behind only the faint smell of herbs and shadow. Lyric's chest heaved. The threat was real, close, and cunning. Whoever the intruder was, they knew the castle well and moved like a ghost. The Omega knew that this was only a part of a larger plan, one that might reach the very heart of the kingdom. Returning to the upper halls, Lyric found Alaric waiting, his cloak dripping, eyes intense. "Did you see?" he asked. Lyric nodded. "They are skilled and they will not be caught easily, but I know their path now. I can anticipate their next move." Alaric studied them for a long moment, then reached out and placed a hand on Lyric's shoulder, firm and grounding. "You are braver than anyone I have ever known, and you are necessary. Never doubt your place here." The touch sent a shiver through Lyric, a mixture of fear, awe, and something unspoken that neither dared voice. They nodded, determination settling in their chest. Together they would face the threat. The next day brought unease. Nobles whispered more urgently, and even the guards seemed tense, eyes scanning shadows as if anticipating attack. Lyric and Alaric moved through the halls together, a silent partnership forged in necessity. The Alpha King trusted the Omega, though no one else in the castle understood the bond that was forming. Lyric discovered another clue, a hidden message carved into the wooden beams of the tower, invisible to the untrained eye. The words spoke of a curse, old and dangerous, tied to the royal bloodline. The conspirators sought not just power, but the destruction of the royal line itself, using both betrayal and dark magic. The Omega hurried to the king, laying the evidence before him. Alaric read in silence, face grim, jaw tight. "The danger is greater than I imagined," he said finally. "We must act before the curse can take hold." Lyric nodded. "And we must act together. Trust is the only weapon we have that they cannot anticipate." The king's eyes softened for a fleeting moment. "I trust you, Lyric," he said quietly, "but even trust cannot undo what has already begun." That night the storm reached its peak. Thunder shook the castle, lightning illuminating the halls in sudden, blinding flashes. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, bending in ways that made the stone corridors feel alive. Lyric moved through the castle again, searching, listening. The pulse of dark magic had grown stronger, more dangerous, and Lyric knew it would not remain hidden for long. They followed the subtle currents of magic, leading them to a chamber beneath the throne room, hidden behind a tapestry. The air was thick, charged with energy, and in the flickering candlelight, relics of old power glimmered ominously. The intruder was there, crouched over a small altar, chanting softly. Their words twisted the magic in the air, shaping it into something dangerous and unseen. Lyric's breath caught. One misstep could unleash forces that even the Alpha King might not control. "Stop," Lyric said again, stepping into the chamber. I will not let you harm the kingdom." The figure spun, eyes wide with surprise. Before Lyric could react, the intruder raised their hand, sending a pulse of shadowy energy toward them. Lyric barely dodged, rolling to the side as the dark magic struck the wall, leaving scorch marks and a lingering sense of dread. Alaric appeared at the doorway, cloak whipping in the storm, eyes blazing. "Enough," he commanded. His voice carried the weight of authority and power, forcing the shadows to retreat if only momentarily. The intruder vanished, slipping through a hidden exit, leaving only silence and the smell of smoke. Lyric's hands shook as they clutched the edge of the altar. The danger had not ended. It had only grown closer, more cunning, more deadly. The Alpha King approached, placing a hand on Lyric's shoulder once more. "You have done well," he said, voice low. "But the threat remains, and it will not wait for us to be ready." Lyric nodded, heart pounding. "I know, but we will face it together." The storm outside began to subside, leaving a wet, gleaming castle behind. Yet inside the tension remained, the shadows longer, the whispers sharper. The conspirators had not revealed themselves fully. They had only begun. Lyric stood at the balcony, looking out over the rain-soaked gardens. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the twisted shapes of statues and trees. Somewhere hidden in the castle, the intruder moved with purpose, carrying secrets and dark intentions. Lyric whispered into the night, words lost to the wind. The storm had finally passed, leaving Erendor soaked and shimmering under a pale dawn. Lightning no longer cut the sky, but the air still carried a charge, a quiet hum of magic that had been disturbed and not yet calmed. The castle, though outwardly still, seemed alive with the echoes of the night's chaos. Every shadow, every corridor held the memory of danger and betrayal. Lyric walked through the halls, senses alert. The events of the past days had left them restless. The intruder had vanished, but the threat had not ended. Something deeper, older, and more dangerous had begun to stir. It was tied to the royal bloodline, to the curse hinted at in the hidden letters and the secret altar. The magic was ancient, subtle yet deadly, and it had been awakened. The Omega's thoughts returned to Alaric. The Alpha King was in the throne room, standing like a sentinel over the kingdom he had vowed to protect. The bond between them had deepened in ways neither dared speak aloud. Trust, respect, and a quiet recognition that they were stronger together than apart. Yet both knew that danger could strike at any moment, and even courage would not be enough. Alaric's eyes were sharp as he noticed Lyric enter. "The castle is uneasy," he said, voice low, as if speaking too loudly might awaken the threat itself. "Even after the storm, there is movement in the shadows." Lyric approached, placing the evidence they had gathered on the desk, relics, notes, and symbols of the curse. "It is worse than we feared," Lyric said. "The intruder is only part of it. The curse is tied to the royal bloodline. It can influence hearts, weaken loyalty, even bend magic to its will." Alaric's jaw tightened. "Then we face it together," he said. "The kingdom will not fall while I still breathe, and I will not let fear control me." Lyric nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. They had warned the king, protected him, and now the final confrontation was approaching. Their role had evolved. They were no longer just a messenger, a quiet observer. They were a shield, a guide, and in some unspoken way the heart beside the Alpha King's power. The day passed slowly, each moment heavy with tension. Nobles moved cautiously through the halls, aware of the lockdown and fearful of the curse. Guards patrolled with sharpened senses, eyes scanning shadows as though anticipating betrayal. Lyric walked beside Alaric, their steps synchronized, their presence a silent reassurance. As dusk approached, Lyric felt it, a pulse of dark energy, subtle at first, growing stronger, weaving through the castle like a living thing. They turned toward Alaric, eyes wide. "It is here," they said. "The magic is awakening." Alaric's expression hardened, resolve settling like armor. "Then we confront it before it takes hold." They moved through the corridors together, a silent partnership forged in trust and necessity. The air grew heavy, the shadows longer, and the faint hum of ancient magic thrummed beneath their feet. Every door, every corner, every flicker of candlelight could conceal danger. Finally, they reached the hidden chamber beneath the throne room, the place where the intruder had worked their dark magic before. Candles burned low, casting long, jagged shadows. The small altar of ancient power stood in the center, surrounded by relics that pulsed faintly with a shadowed glow. A figure appeared from the darkness, the intruder, cloaked and masked, eyes bright with intent. Lyric's heart raced. This was the moment they had been preparing for. The Alpha King stepped forward, aura of authority blazing. "You have trespassed too long," Alaric said, voice steady, carrying the full weight of his power. "Your betrayal ends tonight." The intruder laughed softly, a sound like broken glass. "You cannot stop what has already begun," they whispered, raising their hand. Shadows coiled and twisted around the altar, tendrils of magic moving like serpents ready to strike. Lyric stepped forward, voice ringing clear. "The kingdom is not yours to command. I will not allow this." The intruder's eyes flicked toward them, and for a moment the shadows hesitated. Lyric's courage shone like a blade through the darkness, and the ancient magic recoiled slightly, sensing determination. Alaric moved beside Lyric, placing a hand on their shoulder. "Together," he said, and their combined presence strengthened the wards of the castle. They moved as one, their bond a force the intruder could not anticipate. The battle was subtle but intense. Shadows lashed, curling toward them like living things, and Lyric countered with words and gestures of power, learned through observation, intuition, and courage. Alaric channeled his strength, commanding the elements and his own authority to restrain the dark magic. Together they became a force of balance, light against shadow, truth against deceit. The intruder's spell faltered, then shattered, leaving them staggering back, their mask of confidence slipping. Lyric stepped forward, eyes fierce. "It is over," they said. "Your power cannot bend those who trust and act with courage." Alaric moved to the intruder, capturing the figure before they could escape. The chamber was still except for the faint hum of residual magic. The ancient curse was contained, the relics neutralized, and the kingdom was safe for now. The Alpha King turned to Lyric, gray eyes softening. "You have done more than I ever could have expected," he said. "You have saved the kingdom and perhaps even me." Lyric felt a warmth in their chest. "I did what was necessary," they said, voice quiet but steady, "and I would do it again." Alaric stepped closer, and for a fleeting moment the storm outside was reflected in the tension between them. The bond forged in fear, trust, and shared danger had grown into something deeper, unspoken but undeniable. "You have a place here," Alaric said softly. "Not as an observer, not as someone ignored, but as someone whose voice matters, whose courage matters." "You are important to me." Lyric's breath caught. The words, simple yet weighty, carried a gravity that shook them. They nodded, understanding fully the depth of trust, respect, and quiet emotion in that statement. The next days were filled with recovery and vigilance. The castle began to breathe again, slowly shaking off the tension of betrayal and magic. Nobles cautiously resumed their duties, though many were wary, aware that their loyalty had been tested and measured. Lyric moved through the halls with newfound confidence. They were no longer simply the Omega dismissed by the world. They were recognized, respected, and trusted. And in the quiet moments, they noticed the subtle attention of Alaric, moments of unspoken connection that neither could yet voice. The storm outside the castle had left the gardens gleaming. Rain-soaked flowers and trees sparkled in the morning light, a sign that even after darkness, life continued, resilient and determined. Lyric often walked there, thinking, observing, remembering the dangers they had faced. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of gold and crimson, Lyric and Alaric stood together on the northern balcony, overlooking the kingdom. The wind played with their hair, and the faint pulse of magic in the air was calm now, but still present, a reminder that the world was never without its dangers. "You have grown stronger," Alaric said, voice low, almost intimate, "and not just in courage. You have learned to trust yourself, to act, and to protect what matters." Lyric met his gaze, eyes steady. "And I have learned that even power is not absolute. That trust, even when fragile, can be stronger than magic or steel." Alaric nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "And that is why I trust you, why I have needed you more than I realized." The Omega felt a shiver run through them. Words hung between them, delicate yet heavy with meaning. Trust, courage, and something more unspoken, yet present in every glance, every shared silence. As night fell, the castle quieted, and for the first time in many days, the threat felt truly behind them. Yet Lyric knew that the world was never completely safe. Shadows lingered, magic still pulsed, and hearts could still betray. But for now, in this moment, there was balance, and a fragile peace had returned.